The BBC News now on BBC One and BBC One HD with Jane Hill.
New year, new fare rises on the trains. Tickets go up by more than 6% on average as passengers take the strain. Improving world football's tarnished image. FIFA's president Sepp Blatter says he's setting up an anti-corruption committee. Criminal charges could be brought against the rioters at Ford Open Prison, warns the prison's minister. And Glasgow remembers. 40 years after the Ibrox disaster, which claimed the lives of 66 football fans. Hello, good evening. Rail fares went up today by an average of more than 6%, and some commuters' season ticket prices will increase by more than 12%. Train companies insist the rise will mean more trains and better services, but the customers' watchdog says many passengers will find the increases baffling. John Maguire reports.
I'll have a journey now of 45 minutes going to work.
Like millions of others, Mark Snuggs is getting ready to go back to work after the Christmas break. He's only just renewed his season ticket from Tunbridge to London to avoid paying the extra £350 and says the expense is making him look at alternatives.
It's getting to the point where, do I consider getting a different job, maybe where I can work from home more, maybe even a different form of transport, maybe a motorbike or some other form of transport to get into London. Do I drive in?
From today, some of the biggest rises will be paid by regular travellers like Mark. If you commute between Canterbury and London, for example, you'll pay an extra £488, up by 12.7%. Live in Gloucester and travel to Birmingham regularly, your fares will cost £268 more, a rise of 8.8%. In Wales, a season ticket between Cardiff and Bridgend is up by £72. That's 9.8% more. Train companies say the government is demanding more investment and the extra money is well spent.
Services have been improving, certainly in terms of punctuality, over many years, and they will continue to do so over the forthcoming years. Overcrowding is an issue, and actually one of the things train companies want to do is to bring on more trains more quickly than is currently planned.
But passenger groups say it's too much.
Well, I certainly think that those who are having to pay significantly more than the average are going to find it very unfair. This is a time when you're not expecting any prices to be rising at that sort of rate.
Across the UK, we make more than 1 billion rail journeys every year, and the challenge is to provide the infrastructure and the number of trains to cope with that demand. Last November, the government announced plans to buy an extra 2,000 carriages to ease overcrowding on the busiest routes. So, who pays for our railways? At the moment, it's equally shared between public money and train users. But the aim is to shift the cost away from taxpayers, so hard-pressed and sometimes hard-squashed passengers will foot more of the bill. John Maguire, BBC News, Kent.
The FIFA president, Sepp Blatter, says he wants to strengthen the organisation's credibility and transparency by setting up an independent committee to deal with corruption. Our sports correspondent Dan Rowan is here with me with more. What exactly is Sepp Blatter proposing then, Dan?
What Blatter wants to do is have between 7 and 9 members in this anti-corruption committee, taken from the worlds of business and politics as well as from sport. He won't sit on it, so he says it will be independent. I think it's significant in the sense that it's the first real step taken by football's world governing body to try and repair its damaged reputation after a quite dreadful year when the entire bidding process for both the 2018 and 22 World Cup finals was sullied in accusations and allegations of corruption. 2 EXCO members were suspended after the Sunday Times claimed that they were attempting to sell their votes for cash. Then there were allegations of collusion between bidding nations. The BBC's Panorama programme claimed that senior officials were engaging in bribes in the 1990s. And that astonishing World Cup vote early last month in Zurich, when Qatar, especially controversially, was rewarded the right to stage the World Cup in 2022. Blatter simply had to be seen to do something, and now he has.
So the key question, of course, is will this change anything?
Well, I think it's important to stress that this is by no means an admission of guilt by Blatter. I spoke to two senior officials who worked on behalf of the England and Australia bids earlier this evening. Two bids, of course, which failed in the end, only got 3 votes between them. They both said they were sceptical. It was all part of Blatter's campaign to be re-elected in June. One thing is for certain, it'll be of little comfort this to England and all those who hope for a World Cup here in 8 years' time.
Dan Rowan, thank you. Police investigating the murder of the landscape architect Joe Yates in Bristol have issued a fresh appeal for witnesses. They want to talk to anyone who was in the Longwood Lane area of Long Ashton, where Miss Yates' body was found, between December the 17th and Christmas Day. More items were removed this evening from the building where Joe Yates lived, and police have urged women in the Bristol area not to walk home alone after dark and for householders to keep their premises secure. Inmates at Ford Open Prison who rioted on New Year's Eve may face criminal charges. That was the message from the prison's minister, Crispin Blunt, on a visit to the site in West Sussex today. Prisoners set fire to the building after staff tried to carry out breathalyser tests. Sophie Hutchinson reports.
This is the wreckage from the violent riots at Ford Prison that are now under investigation. The burned-out shells of accommodation blocks, a gym, a post room and games areas. It's believed the riot broke out after inmates suspected of drinking alcohol on New Year's Eve refused to be breathalyzed. The prison's ministers stressed those responsible will be punished.
There will be a prison service internal inquiry, and there will be a number of issues which will have to be addressed and examined in the course of that. And I also anticipate that there will be a police inquiry into the events which could then lead to criminal prosecutions.
Ford is an open prison which specialises in rehabilitation. It holds low-risk Category D inmates, but there are some violent offenders nearing the end of their sentence. On New Year's Eve, there were almost 500 prisoners, supervised by just 2 prison officers and 4 support staff. Official reports in the past have raised concerns about low levels of staffing at the prison, but one former inmate believes that's not the main problem.
There's a new type of inmate in the prison system now. They're young, they're equivalent really of the young offenders, but there's more of them now, so they're now in the mainstream prisons. And they are impossible to control because they don't care.
And it's clear from official reports that Ford Prison has had serious problems with illicit alcohol and drugs being easily smuggled in by inmates. This is the perimeter fence that runs alongside the prison, and locals said this is the kind of area where alcohol is dropped off to be smuggled into the prison. We haven't walked that far and we've already come across an empty bottle of vodka and one of brandy. Questions are being asked about why the warnings of problems were never properly addressed. But prison governors insist it's a very difficult problem to crack.
Where it does happen, you try and have mechanisms in place to detect it and deal with it. But to do that and be 100% foolproof that it would never happen would take such an enormous amount of money that it wouldn't really be cost effective.
These are the burnt-out roofs of the prison blocks damaged in the blaze. Remarkably, no one was hurt, but ensuring violence of this kind is never repeated is now a priority for this prison. Sophie Hutchinson, BBC News, West Sussex.
The floods in the Australian state of Queensland that have forced thousands of people from their homes have claimed their first life. A 41-year-old woman died after being swept from her car as she tried to drive across a causeway. More than 20 towns have been cut off or flooded across an area larger than France and Germany combined. The coalition government in Pakistan has lost its parliamentary majority, raising fears about its survival. The decision could lead to a vote of no confidence in the Prime Minister, Yusuf Raza Gilani. The second largest party resigned from his coalition in protest at the government's poor performance, particularly, it said, on the issues of corruption and the economy. Thousands of Apple iPhone users got an unexpected lie-in this morning. The phone was apparently unable to cope with the arrival of the new year and its alarm failed to activate. It's caused anger and frustration for many owners, as Greg Wood has been finding out.
At Apple's flagship London store today, customers were looking for answers. They wanted to know why the alarm clock application on their handsets has failed to work since the new year, causing many people to oversleep by mistake.
Well, I set the alarm this morning and it didn't wake me up. And I phoned them up. They said, well, come down into the shop and just been up there. They said it's a continuous problem at the moment since the beginning of the year.
It didn't work.
What time did you set it for?
10 o'clock. Well, I have 2 phones, so I was okay.
The cause appears to be a fault in the computer program which controls the clock application. It only affects alarms which are selected to sound once. In a statement, Apple said, "We're aware of an issue related to non-repeating alarms set for January the 1st or 2nd.